About 10 years ago, my wife was pharmacist in charge and she had the final say so when it came to all hiring. A woman came in with holes in her jeans and a red pocket t-shirt, way underdressed for the job. My wife gave her the job anyway because she met qualifications and liked her personality. We moved on from that place, but recently my wife received a letter from that woman telling her thank you for giving her the chance. She is now the head technician. At the time of the interview she had been homeless, living in her car, and those were her nicest clothes. When I was 17 I went to a high-end restaurant to get an application on my way home from school. It was a completely split-second choice and didn't even factor in what I was wearing: leggings that looked like jeans, pink flip-flops, and a full face of makeup. Another woman was there dressed appropriately and was applying as well. I'm pretty sure I got the job over her because she was being picky and only wanted to be a bartender, and I put any position available on my application. Once she left, the GM asked me if I would be able to come back in an hour for a sit-down interview with an appropriate outfit. They called me at 9 p.m. that night and told me to start the next day. I was genuinely grateful that they didn't take my attire into account and still gave me a chance. I worked there for a year and it was the best job I've ever had. I sat down and first question from the prospective boss was, "How old are you?" With an edge to his voice, I was 43 at the time and in great shape. Instead of, "That's illegal," or whatever, I said, "Old enough to jump this desk and kick your ass for asking that question." We talked for 2 more hours. When I was interviewing for my current job, I admitted when I didn't know what the hiring manager was talking about. She said that was all right and I could be trained, and she asked me what kinds of things I did at my old job. After I told her how I basically single-handedly ran the McDonald's drive-thru from 6 until 8 every morning, she hired me on the spot. I was going through it at the time and basically homeless. I had gotten a job interview and he was asking me the basic questions. He asked me about what struggles I've overcome and I basically broke down crying to this poor man who had no idea what to do. I didn't get the job because I didn't actually have all the requirements, but he was really nice about it. He came into the interview, said he wanted to start out the interview with a joke, proceeds to tell a very racist joke, got asked to leave. Back in the day, I worked at a place, small business, very blue collar, that would advertise job openings in the local newspapers. Applicants were asked to drop their resumes off at the front desk. They could have done it online, but this was a deliberate choice. There was one woman at the front desk who would usually receive the resumes that were dropped off, and she was a damn fine judge of character. There would be a surge of people dropping of resumes and some of them self-selected out of the running right away, a resume handwritten in pencil, stuff like that. But since the business was all about direct customer service, it was important to weed some of the applicants out right away, and the boss trusted her instincts. Come to drop off a resume and be drunk, high, dressed in clothes that have been slept in for weeks, reek of BO, get all testy about why the interview can't happen right now, or just have that blank look of stupidity that says I don't give a crap. She would take the resume, without reading it, and say, "Okay, you're number 110. And I'll make sure the boss gets this." She would write the number 110 in the top corner of the resume in front of the applicant, then, after they had left, would make a quick diagonal stroke through the 2 ones so that it now read no, and would put it in the pile. Primitive system, but it worked. Also a reminder that when going to a job interview one should treat everyone on site, parking attendants, security guards, receptionists and just random people walking around working there, with the same respect one would give to the interviewer. Many employers will check with the people they trust for their opinion, and some of those lowly people can make or break you. Once at a job interview, the interviewing manager asked if I would report him if he was behaving unethically towards staff. I think it's possibly he was asking about my integrity and willingness to stand up for what's right, but it definitely came across as "We're shady here, are you cool with that?" Did not finish the interview. When I was applying for a welding position at the GE train plant, I did as my trade school told me and came to the interview ready to work, so I came in my fire retardant pants and long sleeve shirt with my hard hat, welding hood and gloves in my truck ready to go. Little did I know the hiring process was like American Idol. I go in and there are about 40 PPL in the waiting room dressed nice. I found out they start with 40 PPL and each time they call you back for another interview they eliminate people until they get to 1 person. This whole process takes about a month. I was told to come back dressed nice, so I did. Each interview was just all of us taking tests on the computer. I made it to the final and it was just me and another guy, and that's finally when I got to sit down and have an actual interview. I choked in the interview because I knew this was a big deal and I got really nervous. I didn't get picked because I assumed the interview and I was so pissed that I wasted a month of my life for nothing and didn't even get a weld test or anything. How could they know they just hired a guy that's good at interviews but sucks ass at welding without doing a weld test? If I were there I would weld test first and do the rest later. I just hated how they wasted our time to only hire one guy like it's some kind of game show. I could have got a different job if they hadn't wasted all my time. Yes, I could have went to other interviews, but I was saving myself for this job. I didn't want to start somewhere and have to quit right away if I got it because this job paid a SHT ton and everyone wanted to snag that job. I dressed up nice for my first job interview for a security company as a guard. Got told to meet at a McDonald's parking lot, because the company building is hard to find. The boss arrived nicely dressed and asked why we don't just sit in the McDonald's cafe outside. Boss was female and she was wearing a business outfit with a skirt, me in nice pants and button-up shirt, looked super overdressed. The job interview took place between screaming children on the playground and a table of girls overhearing every word I say. I think most people thought we were on a date in McDonald's in fancy clothes, which was awkward, but knowing the girls would listen to my job interview made me entirely nervous. It was a horrible experience. Got the job, but the boss turned out to be just the kind of person that would bring a job interviewee to a McDonald's cafe. It was an interesting few months though. This isn't anything too horrible, but about 10 years ago, my dad was able to arrange for me to interview at UPS as a driver helper for the upcoming holiday season. I get there and the interview went great. My interviewer was nice and seemed to like me, and every question she asked me I answered, and again, she really seemed to like everything I had to say. At the end of the interview, she tells me that she intends to hire me full time. So forget driver helper, she wants me to work in the warehouse and then go from there. Awesome. Here's where it all went downhill. She had an obvious cold. This was on a Friday and I had to come back the following Monday to be processed, and she would get me set up with a FT position. Well, Monday comes, and she had called it because of the cold she had. The lady who processed me had no knowledge of the FT position and just put me as a driver helper. Lol, I have had an interview while shirtless, covered in blood, no mine, and with a cigarette hunging out of my mouth. Turns out my old boss was in a car in front of me that blew through a stop sign and had gotten T-boned, so the interview happened between me trying to stop bleeding with my shirt and giving him a smoke before the ambulance took him away to the hospital. I once was looking for a new job, so I blasted out tons of resumes everywhere. I got an interview for a receptionist position at a highly recognized law firm. I go to the appointment and the guy interviewing me was very attractive. He tells me straight my computer science background is not what they need, but he wanted to meet me because of these, hands me a stack of sexy selfies I had for my BF. When I had tried to upload my resume saved on my computer saved as BK, I accidentally sent the file BK tray, which was a bunch of sexy selfies in lingerie and sexual poses that I had made for my BF. He just wanted to meet me and to go for a drink. I walked out red-faced, embarrassed and kinda mad I wasted my time. I've arrived 10 minutes early, let them know I was there, kept waiting for over half an hour, and then told the interviewer had gone home for the day, at 2 p.m, and could I please come back tomorrow? I told them I don't appreciate being stood up like this, I do have other job interviews, not to mention a life, and I left, never went back. Some of the HR/boss goons would contact me and ask why I didn't show up at the interview. I told them of the situation, and they would either deny it and claim it was my fault, or they would demand I come back because it was them who would be signing my paychecks, and that my time was their time. I told all of those people who said those things to fuck off. And blocked them. The one and only job I got in the field I went to college for decided to hire a high school co-op student to help me unpaid intern for high school credit for those who are unaware of the program. Most of the kids were unremarkable, but one came in with ripped jeans, a stained gray hoodie and absolutely reeked of cigarette smoke. He also seemed entirely unenthused about the process and the job. We obviously did not hire him and instead hired the Harry Potter look-alike who seemed fascinated by computers and wanted to learn how to build them, who wore a suit and tie to the interview. Fortunately, due to the nature of the co-op program, the teachers of all the candidates called to see how the interviews went and took our feedback, so we were able to let this guy's teachers know how unprofessionally he was dressed and how disinterested he seemed. Also note, these programs have donated clothes to help students who may not have appropriate attire for interviewing to help them out. We had a guy walk into interview in full-on clown costume with face paint. It was a bet for 3-year min wage. He won when we hired him. He was part of developer team of software operator we needed. My boss was getting me and another employee who had been working there for a while's opinion on some candidates. We worked at a geology museum that had a whole section devoted to paleontology and talked about evolution. One question normally asked during the interview was what you would do if you were giving a tour and the people said they believed in creationism. Well, apparently one guy went off about how creationism is real and evolution is a lie. At a geology museum, where we talk about evolution, that person did not get hired. My last series of job interview that finally landed me my current employment, I did through an agency. Now keep in mind I was 44 at the time and it wasn't my first job application rodeo. So I was surprised the agency sent me emails about what attire I should wear and how I should approach and behave during the interviews, even after successfully completing several of the interviews while accompanied by a member of said agency. After inquiring about it, they excused it as generalized emails that were sent to the candidate together with the job offers. Interview parameters was still a bit disturbing, since most people with university degree and for my field mostly work in offices, so we tend to appear in a suit with usually a light blue button-down shirt plus tie and good leather shoes out of pure instinct, or a mix of instinct and experience. I took a job once without realizing that after nearly 25 years of doing that same job, be careful of the environment into which you transfer. If 90% of the employees have some type of external affiliation, they're all Mormons or retired military or somehow related closely or distantly to the family, or they're all football fans, you'll always be on the outside of things. I used to work as an office assistant for a small, one-room, telemarketing office, and I was able to witness a few interviews. Again, one room. Probably the worst was the guy who came in to interview with his mom. My boss, being who he was, went ahead and gave the guy a chance. I am not kidding when I say this guy had anger management issues. After the initial training and being given a script to read, the guy spent the next half hours growling. I mean, you can probably guess that a lot of telemarketing is getting told no and getting hung up on. Every time this happened to the guy, he let out a loud animalistic, guttural growl. Thankfully this only lasted for about a half hour because at that point he stood up angrily and walked away. He didn't come back. Seriously, his mom came to get his check. Another good one was the guy who used to be friends with my brother when we were kids. When I knew him he was a geek, wild hair, Coke bottle glasses, short and skeevy. When he came in, he recognized me before I recognized him. Now he was a bit of a wannabe gangster. He always wore sleeveless jerseys and oversized basketball shorts. He even wore a baseball hat with the bill off to the side, and stuff like that. Notably, he wasn't wearing glasses. To make this short, no, he wasn't wearing contacts, and, no, he never had LASIK. He just didn't wear glasses anymore because they're not cool. The boss didn't even know this until I was discussing it with him, loudly. He thought it was funny and kept offering him a magnifying glass. This is also the point where I should mention that these guys had to call off of phone pages, with teeny tiny, itty bitty print. The guy took the magnifying glass. I was a security guard for a downtown high-rise office building. 4 total guards, 3 shifts per day, 1 guard per shift. Mostly we would just sit around doing nothing and do a 1-5 hours patrol twice during each 8-hour shift. One of the other guards got found, wasn't very sneaky and talked to the other non-managerial guards about it all, to be skipping his patrols, sleeping in the break room, getting high at work, stealing food, stealing office supplies, refused to confront vagrants or drunks, etc. Basically checked every box for how to get fired as a security guard. They didn't fire him cause for how little we pay him. We're just paying for a warm body. He made a lot less than the other guards cause he was like a 20-yo kid and it was only his second year in security. Still, I don't get how he still works there. A few years ago, I went for a desk job at a manufacturing plant. Wore a nice blouse, some black dress slacks, and dress shoes. It's an interview, always dress nice. Well, after passing all the testing and background, the plant manager met with me, took a look at my clothing, and said that he didn't think I would be able to handle the job working in a manufacturing plant, even though my resume showed previous years of MW. Well, my mother was friends with the head of HR, told her what happened, and she reamed the plant manager a new one, and hired me herself. Found out a few years later after leaving there that the plant manager got demoted to a regular employee because the plant was doing so bad under his leadership. Been on the other side of this, but the interviewer was pretty horrible. The majority of the interview was focused on my thoughts on the Confederate statue being moved from the courthouse in my city. The whole time, I just couldn't believe she chose to ask a black interviewee about Confederate statues. I got the job, but lasted a month and it was seriously the worst job I've ever had. She made so many jokes about one of our coworkers and how Mexican she was. She was white. What the boss didn't realize was the coworker's daughter was actually half Latina and took great offense, but never said anything because she needed the job. They tried to blame me for mistakes the owner would make. Tried to fire me after 2 weeks over it. Fought to keep my job, but only because I needed the extra 2 weeks of income until another job I accepted started. Once they tried again, I already had my stuff packed and said sure. Little did they know I already planned on bailing out that same day. Lol. Simultaneously the best and worst thing to ever happen to me. I once had an interview with the company president, VP of engineering and lead engineer. The latter two asked good, pointed questions. Meanwhile, the president was muttering the entire time, "He's not who we want." Got the job, was young and naive. The company president tried to fire me at least once, but the VP blocked him. Then he insulted me when I asked for a raise. Finally, after 14 months, the VP got pissed at the president and went to his vacation home for 2 weeks. The president laid me off with a bunch of lies and a big severance check. It got crazier, but I'll leave it at that. Was working at a summer camp. Saw this guy come in for an interview wearing this backpack that had a cat on it that was giving the middle finger. He got the job Lamau. Maybe A+, but an hour after signing up for something to help me found work. I happened to be in my, now, place of work for forms to take home and signed. I was wearing baggy clothes, but my now manager noticed and take me away for 10 to 15 minute interview and asked if I can start the next day. Lucky thing ever. I once had an interviewee, someone really curvy up top. She showed up in really tight yoga pants and a very low cut, ripped, tank top. I think she was going for sex appeal. This was for a client-facing position. I would have hired her if dressed appropriate for an interview. She was great for the position on paper, in person not so much. Had a job offer that I was over the moon about, $23.89 an hour, 4 days a week, holidays are paid, 10-hour day pay for 9 hours of work, and company paid insurance and 401k. Get to the interview and they told me I'd get those benefits after 2 years of no callens, 6-day work weeks, no benefits, and all at a measly $15.20 an hour. I stood up after they said that and told the boss that the job wasn't for me, to which he profusely screamed and cursed at me. I walked out and through the office and out the front door, only to hear him chase me while still screaming. He's no longer in charge there, and I took a neat little offer working for the government at the time and made bank off it. I wasn't the hiring manager, but I did call the hiring manager over to interview this person. She looked almost exactly like a Bratz doll, dramatic makeup complete with the pouty lips, little mini skirt, midriff tank top, platform high heel shoes, big chunky jewelry and giant fluffed up pigtails with hot pink streaks. The hiring manager gasped slightly when they saw the potential new hire before taking her back into the office. The next week I saw the new girl on the floor of my store wearing khakis, a dress shirt, subtle makeup and tasteful jewelry. Her hair was still streaked pink but done up in a nice bun or other updos. She was amazing to work with, and last I heard she was pursuing a business degree. I once interviewed for a technician job with a well-known at the time, now closed, IT supplier. Walked through dark room full of call center agents, one dressed still in his PJs with panda slippers to match. Lady interviewing said I will be starting here for a couple of days. Nailed the interview, with high-end suit and tie and shoes polished so well it can double as a mirror. Came the offer. Basically after paying rent for the one-bedroom granny flat I stayed in I would have about $10 to live on. I declined. Lady interviewing said, but you can have as much coffee as you want and dress casual. Noped out of the interview. They did call back later to offer me another $20 a month more. One of my most recent interviews, so someone I know from my kickboxing class works for a retail chain. She asked if I would be interested in a position. I was looking for part-time stuff, so I said sure. Didn't realize it was a group interview. We were put into 2 groups and had to choose a product to do a 5 minutes presentation about. At the end the managers went around the groups asking us our availability. I said I was flexible and they said they would get in touch. They never did. The girl who offered me the position was puzzled. Abid stepped me up with a 1-to-1 interview. That took basically 5 mins and the guy fobbed me off by saying sorry, but we mostly have students here. Since you're an outside hire we'll keep on our books and get in touch. Walked out thinking I dodged a bullet because since I wasn't a student they couldn't rope me into crazy hours and barely minimum wage. I live in the UK so I'm not sure how different our job system is to the US, but I'm surprised at all these scam companies literally just being allowed to set up shop. There are 2 interviews that gave me WTF moments. 1, this guy was doing really well and aced through the interview and I asked him a pretty throwaway question: why did you leave your last job? He said I beat up my supervisor. Considering that our job was over 95% female, he wasn't hired. 2, this lady was on something and kept coming in and out of the interview to answer question. It was like she fell asleep and when you asked a question, she would lift her head in a bobbing fashion and answer. I thought she was on something. In retrospect, I now hope she wasn't driving. I didn't even think about that until now. I'm a manager at an auto parts store. We had one employee that was like 19 years old that knew a lot about cars, but this kid had zero work ethic. He would always play on his phone, FaceTime his girlfriend. Dude was obsessed with this chick, and run off to the bathroom for 30 to 45 minutes at a time. One of the other managers is some mid-20s female who thinks everything is a joke and wants to do very little actual work. She would flirt with customers and even employees we were trusted to be leaders of. Most people didn't mind cause she's attractive and has a huge ass. She would always complain about being single and her desire to find a good man. Her problem is that the only thing she offers to a relationship is another man's kids. Working with her drives me nuts. I was called into an interview and the interviewer told me I don't need to wear a tie. It was summer and I was out of school and didn't have a suite ready, so I dressed up in a jacket and a dress shirt and matching pants. The interviewer compared me to someone else waiting to interview. I was like, "You told me I didn't have to wear a tie. Oh, this is some kind of test?" Honest people often can't tell when others are lying. Also, the guy wanted to see how fast and accurately I could type, so he had me type my resume. The guy complained about the red lines mean bad spelling, but I was like, those are proper nouns. Does your spell check have company names like Pfizer in its dictionary? Ugh, I am glad I didn't work for that guy. I saw him once in front of his building and wished I spoke my mind, but I get a sense that his ego has its own center of gravity that distorts his reality. Red flags, we're like family here. I always answer with, "Thank you for letting me know. My family has done me worse than any of my enemies ever has. Have a nice day." Well, I did answer once with a pause, look out the door down the hall, and said, that explains all the yelling and drama from the break room. Interviewer, are you trying to throw this interview? Trying to be very stern, absolutely. Have a nice day. Too many interviewers forget one major fact. While I'm trying to sell myself to you, you also need to sell your company to me. Please note, I don't mean, sell it to me like you're Amway, I mean, don't think you're God's gift to employment. Once when I was in college, I applied to a vaguely worded job listing. I got called to schedule the interview, so I wrote down the time and place, and I remember noting dress to impress, since they emphasize dress when making the appointment. I got to a hole in the wall rent an office full of people dressed in suits or skirts and business jackets like me. Maybe 20 of us interviewing at the same time. It started with a 20-minute presentation on the company for all of us. It was a pitch to get us to sell knives door to door. Knives. Stuck it out through the whole process, but after the individual interviews, I left and let them know when they called me offering the position that I wasn't interested. The person who showed up 20 minutes late. Their application said English was their first language. Turns out they only spoke Spanish. They also decided to wear their best surplus military gear. The next applicant smelled of marijuana and was wearing a Mexican-style poncho. Best employee ever. Had a orange-haired independent woman with I need no man glasses and this is what a feminist looks like dress. Took one look and knew it was a HR nightmare in the making, so I said nope. But was overruled 2-1. She's been here 5 weeks and had to take 9 mental health days already. I've been in the workforce for over 30 years. My degree is in literature, but reality has taught me marketing, research, lead generation, and business development. I saw an ad for exactly that and scheduled an interview. Although the job paid well and fitted me to a T, after the interview I was almost hoping they wouldn't offer me a position. The woman interviewing me was late, very much so. We had agreed to meet in her office at 11 a.m. She rushed in there around 12:15. She had her lunch from a fast food place in her hands. I'm not body shaming, just giving some context. She was probably over 300 pounds. She did not apologize for being late and invited me to have a discussion in her office. Everything was Hello Kitty. She was over 50 years old, and she immediately began eating her lunch while speaking to me with the usual questions and chewing with her mouth open. It gets worse. She slipped her shoes off, which I noticed to not see her chewed food, and she had the most horrifying toenails. She looked like she was about to fly from the sky and catch more food. I don't think I've ever met anyone so unprofessional. She offered me the job, but I had to decline. I was looking for something long-term, and it was obvious I wouldn't commit to a company run by a barefoot, chronically late, Hello Kitty fanatic who eats during meetings. I interviewed for a job about 10 years ago. I prepared several days and felt confident that it would do fairly well. Come the day of the interview, I could not answer questions with any clarity. During the interview I was sweating profusely and was quite nauseous. I was so relieved when it was over. When I got home I went straight to bed. A few days later I was hospitalized with sepsis from which I nearly died. I realized afterwards that I should have called and tried to reschedule, but I was in such a brain fog, I was not thinking straight. I once worked in a firm that was so cheap they offered very low wages, so it was almost impossible to get quality applicants. Those who did apply usually had just the bare minimum. One young lady, who really did just have the bare minimum, asked me what my role was. I told her my senior title. She said, "That's the job I want. Are going to be leaving soon?" She was hired over my objections because she was willing to take the low salary. She was fired for incompetence shortly thereafter. If the person doing the interviewing does not bother to show up for the interview, then your strategy is called GTFO. I am willing to wait a maximum of 20 minutes. After that I am either just out of there, most likely never to return, or ask for a rescheduling since there must clearly be something urgent that requires the immediate attention of the person I scheduled the interview with, which sometimes happens. But it is absolutely disrespectful to just let people wait. If someone takes time out of their day for an interview, and you don't even bother to show up for an hour without any word, this tells me more than I need to know. Clearly you do not appreciate the time and effort other people invest in speaking with you, and I am willing to bet that this is also true for the resources of your current staff. Sure, unforeseen stuff sometimes happens, but calling ahead and saying sorry, I can't make it because XYZ came up on short notice, can we reschedule? Is still worlds better than letting your candidate wait and showing up whenever. If you are not 15 minutes early, then you are late. This is not only true for applicants, it is especially true for interviewers. I came in for an interview as a server. I was desperate for a job and had no exp, so I applied to Applebee's. Come in early, wait for the manager, instantly could tell this man wanted to take a dirt nap. IYKYK. I went to shake his hand and introduce myself and he basically ignored my extended hand until he sat down and noticed and shook my hand. I could tell he didn't look at my resume because he just asked if I had any exp, which I said no. Should have known that from my resume, loads of customer service/management exp, but he didn't care, so I waited for him to finish telling me a long no. But instead of letting the interview go there, I made sure to explain to him all of my qualifications. Still didn't get hired. Note the servers were high schoolers or college kids. I'm 28 with 10 plus years working in multiple industries. I was eating at a restaurant when I saw a girl about 35 come in for an interview. She was wearing Daisy Duke shorts, a tube top, and an ankle monitor. I was operations manager. I was first round interview. If I liked them, I sent them to the GM, which was basically a rubber stamp. Guy comes in, he shows up late, carrying a Taco Bell cup and sips on it the entire interview. I ask about his last job. He was fired. Why? Because he was always late or always missed work. A couple other red flags and I decided not to send him to the GM. The next day the GM asks me about him and I tell her I'm not recommending him. She asks why and I tell her. She seems disappointed because he was the boyfriend of the daughter of one of our best employees. A couple of days later she tells me she called him in for an interview. The next day she tells me she hired him. She did this even though he showed up even later to her interview than to mine. Wanna guess why we fired him? If you said not making it to work, you'd be a winner. Oh, and that GM got fired first. Good riddance, June. One of the departments at my university is hiring and the professors want as many students involved as possible because of the last time they were hiring. Last time, the top candidate was looking really good. They just had to give a decent guest lecture before they were officially hired. I don't know the whole story, but they apparently went off on a student for no reason and the student ended up crying. They did not end up getting the job. I went to a couple of interviews after suffering a poison oak outbreak, via the dog, which had gotten all over my arms and face. I had my arms oozing and thoroughly wrapped to try to save the shirt and jacket. The job I got I hadn't shaved for because I shaved, with the poison oak outbreak, a few days before, and it was a special kind of hell. Needless to say, the apology for not shaving was accepted. I once had a candidate disappear. He was running 10 minutes late, so we called to check in. He said he was 15 minutes away. No problem, we waited. 30 minutes pass, I try to call again and can't get through. I called his agency and they also couldn't get hold of him. 2 days later the agency called me to say he had gone AWOL and nobody could call or find the guy. A male manager ended up with this guy to interview, wearing a t-shirt. Not so bad, for a theater job, until you read the large and smaller print. Large print, remember my name. Smaller print, you'll be screaming it later. I wondered if he still lived at home, and his parents didn't want him to move out, so didn't give him good advice for interviews. No joke, had a kid show up for his interview dressed in a My Little Pony suit. He didn't get the job. I didn't get to the interview point cause they wanted me to pay for training with an immediate upfront deposit. Said I wasn't comfortable and my mum in the next room heard that and yelled no and the call ended. Job seekers in the UK, most cases they will let you off you saying no in this case, cause they said I did the right thing. Same if you got asked during the interview as well. Not happened to me but it does happen. Obviously do not decline legit job interviews, invitations and offers that do not ask for your bank details up front before you got the job. After returning from a semester abroad, I was looking for a job to get me through the rest of my undergraduate degree. I was in the final round of interviews with a mid-sized coffee chain and was meeting with the stand manager on Monday and was going to be offered the position. The night before, I met with some acquaintances at a local gourmet ice cream shop, where I had sent an application a week prior. I figured while I was there, I would just introduce myself and let them know I sent an application. I was immediately interviewed by the owners and offered a job on the spot. I accepted. Unfortunately, I was wearing a t-shirt and Nike running shorts Lamau. I'm still embarrassed about it. I always dress professional for interviews. But it worked out in the end because I was promoted in record time, 3 months after starting, and given lots of responsibility. I had an interview straight after teaching an aqua aerobics class. I barely had enough time to shower, let alone dry my hair. I got the job though. That's a wrap. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell for more.